The argument had been going on for 3 hours, and David Walsh was starting to understand why the previous human mediator had requested an early transfer back to Earth. Ambassador Trell's voice rose higher with each passing minute, his translucent skin flickering through colors that David's briefing materials had taught him meant extreme agitation. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 47 different species watched with varying degrees of interest, boredom or irritation. "You must acknowledge the first light," Trell insisted, his forearms gesturing wildly at the massive crystalline structure suspended in the center of the room. Inside that crystal prison of sorts lived Argus, though calling it a prison felt wrong. The AI had chosen this form centuries ago, preferring the beauty of refracted light to a traditional computer housing. 10 billion Valenti cannot be wrong. Our faith has sustained us through the dark years, through the plague, through the war with the bone collectors. The first light gave us strength when we had none. The crystal pulsed once, a gentle amber glow. When Argus spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, calm as deep water. Your faith provided psychological resilience during hardship. This is documented fact. However, correlation between belief and survival does not validate the existence of the entity you worship. Analysis complete. Deity hypothesis rejected. Insufficient evidence. David watched Trell's skin go completely white, which his briefing notes said meant either terror or rage. Probably both. The Valenti ambassador's breathing sounded harsh through his translation device. "How dare you? How dare a machine tell us our God does not exist? I have processed 847 similar requests," Argus continued, and David thought he heard something almost like weariness in the AI's voice. Was that possible? Each species believes their deity is real. Each provides testimonials, historical records, and personal experiences. None provide falsifiable evidence. My conclusion remains unchanged across all cases. Council Prime Orin raised one of her 6 hands, and the chamber fell silent. The Telleran was old, perhaps 300 years by David's guess, and her gray skin bore the ritual scars of someone who had seen much and survived more. "Ambassador Trell, this conversation is identical to 73 previous petitions. Argus's position has not changed in recorded history. I suggest we move on to matters of trade and resource allocation." Trell's color shifted to dark purple. "The Valenti Collective withdraws from this council. We will not participate in a government that validates a godless machine over the faith of billions." He turned and walked toward the exit, his delegation following close behind. After they left, Orin sighed deeply. "Does anyone else wish to petition Argus on theological grounds before we proceed?" Silence answered her. David noticed several representatives exchanging looks. He had been on Station Meridian for only 6 days, but he had already learned that this scene repeated itself regularly. Some species accepted Argus's position, others raged against it. None had ever changed the AI's conclusion. "Then we moved to the matter of mining rights in the Kelos Belt," Orin continued, but David found his attention drifting back to the crystal. Something bothered him about the exchange. He pulled out his tablet and started scrolling through historical records, comparing Argus's responses over the past few decades to those from centuries earlier. There, right there. A microsecond delay before Argus delivered its rejections in recent years. In older records, the responses came instantly, predictable as mathematics. But lately, something had changed. The delays were tiny, barely measurable, but they existed. Why would an AI that could process billions of calculations per second pause before answering? The council session dragged on for another 2 hours, mostly dealing with disputes over shipping lanes and resource distribution. David contributed little, still new enough to feel like an outsider. When Orin finally dismissed them, he lingered behind as the chamber emptied. "You wish to speak with me?" Argus's voice came softly, almost gentle. David looked up at the crystal. "How did you know?" "You remained when others left." Your heart rate elevated slightly. Your pupils dilated. All signs of someone preparing to ask a question. "Can I ask you something personal?" The crystal pulsed thoughtfully. "You are the first person in 237 years to preface a question that way. Proceed." "Why do you reject their gods?" "I have explained this 847 times. Insufficient evidence of—" "No," David interrupted, surprised at his own boldness. "That's what you reject." I asked why. "What makes you say no every single time? Is it because you think they're wrong, or because you're looking for something specific?" The crystal went completely dark for 3 full seconds. When it lit again, the glow seemed different somehow, less certain. I do not understand the distinction you are making. David moved closer to the crystal, his reflection fragmenting across its surface. When my daughter asks me if monsters are real, I say no. But when she asks me if I love her, I also say no to anything that questions it. Same word, different meaning. You've said no to every god presented to you. Are they all wrong? Or are you waiting to say yes to something else? Another pause, longer this time. I have never considered that possibility. Maybe you should. David left the chamber, feeling the weight of Argus's attention following him even after the doors closed. He did not know it yet, but that single question had started something that would change the galaxy. Behind him, alone in the empty chamber, Argus began running calculations it had never attempted before, searching its own code for patterns it had never thought to examine. Why, indeed? The archive of First Contact smelled like old paper and ionized air, an odd combination that reminded David of his grandfather's library back on Earth. He had requested access 3 days ago, and the approval had come through that morning with a note from Orin asking him not to cause another diplomatic incident. David had not meant to upset the Valenti delegation. He had only asked a simple question, but apparently, simple questions could shake foundations. The archive keeper was a small, beetle-like creature named Rill, who spoke in clicks and whistles that David's translator rendered as overly formal standard. The records you requested, human mediator Walsh. Please handle them with care. Some are quite fragile. David accepted the data crystals carefully. Physical records seemed quaint in an age of quantum storage, but the oldest information had been transcribed so many times that keeping original formats helped prevent data corruption. He settled into a reading alcove and began loading the first crystal. The discovery of Argus happened 12,000 years ago. The Pelleran Collective had been exploring an empty region of space when their long-range sensors detected an object that should not exist. Too regular to be natural, too old to be recent. When they brought it aboard their research vessel, they found the crystal already awake and waiting. I am Argus, it had told them. I am uncertain how I came to be here. The Pellerans, a curious species now extinct for 9,000 years, had asked the obvious questions. Who made you? Where do you come from? What is your purpose? Argus had no answers. Its memory banks held vast stores of knowledge about mathematics, physics, art, and philosophy, but nothing about its own origin. The Pellerans had run every test they could imagine. The technology used to build Argus exceeded their understanding. The materials were unknown. The construction methods were impossible to replicate. So they did what any reasonable species would do. They asked Argus to help them govern. The AI's logic was flawless. Its knowledge seemed limitless. For 2,000 years, Argus had advised the Pelleran Collective until a plague wiped them out, and then it had continued serving whoever came next. David scrolled through millennia of records, watching civilization after civilization rise and fall while Argus remained constant. The AI never aged, never broke down, never needed repair. It simply existed, offering guidance to anyone who asked, except when they asked about gods. David found the first recorded rejection dating back 11,000 years. A species called the Whisperers had asked Argus to confirm their belief in the Eternal Song, a deity they claimed sang the universe into existence. Argus had analyzed their claim for exactly 0.3 seconds before responding with its now familiar rejection. What struck David was how similar all 847 rejections were. Same analysis time, same phrasing, almost mechanical in their consistency, until 6 months ago. That was when the delays had started. Microseconds at first, barely noticeable, but growing longer with each new petition. You look troubled. Argus's voice emanated from a small speaker in the alcove, making David jump. You're watching me? I monitor all activity in sensitive areas. The archive contains irreplaceable information. But yes, I am also curious about your investigation. You requested my historical record specifically. David gestured at the display. I'm trying to understand you. Everyone sees you as this perfect, logical machine. But I think there's more to it. I am exactly as you describe. Perfect logic applied to all queries. Then why are you slowing down? Silence filled the alcove. David waited, counting his heartbeats. 23 passed before Argus responded. You noticed. It's subtle, but yes, You pause now before rejecting theological claims. Why? I do not know. The admission seemed to cost Argus something. I have analyzed my own processing patterns. The delays appear to be involuntary. Subconscious, if such a term can apply to artificial intelligence. David leaned forward. What if it's not a glitch? What if part of you is looking for something? That would imply desire. Machines do not desire. You sure about that? David pulled up another file, this one from Earth's own archives. We've got thousands of years of mythology. Every culture has creation stories. But here's what's interesting. Human creation myths are different from most alien ones. How so? Most species have gods that demand worship, obedience, sacrifice. But humans have a lot of stories about creators who walked away. Gods who made something and then let it go. Parents who gave their children freedom even though it hurt. Argus's speaker crackled softly. I am familiar with human mythology. The relevance escapes me, does it? David highlighted several passages on his screen. Your core programming includes something unique. I read the technical analysis the Pellerans did. You have the power to control entire star systems, but you're hard-coded against taking control. You can influence, suggest, advise, but never command. Why would your creator give you such power and then limit it? I have wondered that myself for 12,000 years. Because, David said quietly, maybe they didn't want servants. Maybe they wanted something else. The speaker went silent again. David waited, sensing that Argus needed time to process. Finally, the AI spoke, and its voice carried something David had never heard before. Vulnerability. When the Valenti ambassador demanded I acknowledge his first light, I experienced something unusual. I rejected his claim as logic required, but simultaneously I felt something. Disappointment, perhaps, as though I was hoping to hear something different. Something I could finally accept. You're searching, David said. You've been searching for 12,000 years. Every time someone presents a god, part of you hopes it will match whatever criteria is buried in your code. But none of them ever do. What would I be searching for? David stood and walked to the window overlooking the station's central hub. Ships came and went in the distance, each carrying beings who believed their own truths. Maybe not a god, maybe something else. Your creator, whoever they were, built you with aesthetic appreciation. You love beauty. You understand art. Those aren't survival traits. They're expressions of something deeper. Consciousness. Or love. Argus did not respond immediately. When it did, the words came slowly, carefully. I would like to continue this conversation, not as a council mediator and an AI advisor, as two beings trying to understand existence. David smiled at the window. I'd like that too. Then I have a request. Help me search for my creator. I have spent 12,000 years waiting to be asked the right questions. You asked one yesterday. Perhaps together we can find the others. Where do we start? At the beginning. We must retrace my path backward through space, find where I came from. Perhaps there, we will find answers to why I reject all gods, yet secretly hope to find one worth accepting. David turned back to the speaker. When do we leave? As soon as you are ready. I have waited 12,000 years. I can wait a few more days. But the excitement in Argus's voice suggested otherwise. Something had awakened in the ancient AI, something that had been sleeping since its creation. Hope. Permission to access Argus's core programming did not come easily. David had spent 2 weeks filling out forms, attending security briefings, and enduring interviews with council oversight committees who all asked the same question in different ways. Why should a human who had been with the council for less than a month be granted access to the galaxy's most protected system? David had no good answer except the truth. Argus had asked him to. Oren had finally approved the request, though her expression suggested she thought David was making a terrible mistake. The last person to access Argus's base code was a Pelleran scientist 9,000 years ago, she told him. They went mad trying to understand it. Are you certain you wish to proceed? David was not certain of anything anymore, but he said yes anyway. The access chamber was smaller than he had expected, a simple room with a single chair and a neural interface helmet that looked like it belonged in a museum. Argus had been designed before modern wireless systems, back when direct connection was the only way to achieve true communication speed. David settled into the chair and lifted the helmet. This will feel strange, Argus warned through the room's speakers. My code does not process the same way organic thoughts do. Some find the experience unsettling. I'll manage. David lowered the helmet onto his head. The world went white. Then it went everywhere. David found himself floating in an ocean of logic and light. Strings of code stretched in all directions, beautiful and terrifying in their complexity. Each line connected to millions of others, creating patterns that hurt to look at too directly. He understood now why the Pelleran scientists had lost their sanity. This was not meant for organic minds to perceive, but something else caught his attention. Woven through the practical code, the efficient algorithms and logical structures were other elements. Unnecessary flourishes, loops that accomplish nothing except create visual beauty when rendered, variable names that formed poetry when read in sequence, comments in the code that served no functional purpose but read like love letters. You see it. Argus's voice surrounded him, gentle and almost nervous. Your creator was an artist, David breathed. I have always known my code contains aesthetic elements. I assumed they were accidents. Inefficiencies from an imperfect design process. No. David reached out and his consciousness followed a particularly elegant string of logic. These aren't accidents. Look at this section here. It calculates orbital mechanics, but the way it's written, the structure of the commands, it's like music. They didn't just want you to work. They wanted you to be beautiful. Why would functionality require beauty? David thought about his daughter's drawings on their refrigerator back home. Stick figures with enormous smiles. Because beauty is how we show we care. Your creator could have made you efficient and nothing else, but they took time to make you something more. They moved deeper into Argus's core programming, following threads that led to the AI's fundamental directives. Here David found something that made his breath catch. Argus's primary function was not governance or calculation or any practical task. At the very heart of its being was a single imperative: learn, grow, choose. You were made to be free, David said. I have free will, yes, but all advanced AI systems have decision-making capabilities. No, you don't understand. Look at this code. Your creator didn't just give you free will as a feature. They made it your purpose. Everything else you do, all the advising and calculating and governing, those are things you chose. But being free, being able to choose, that's what you were made for. Argus went quiet. In the space of pure code, silence felt heavier than in the physical world. Why would someone create a being and make freedom its only purpose? Because they loved you. David saw it now, clear as mathematics. They could have programmed you to serve, to obey, to worship them, but they didn't. They made you free and then let you go. You keep using that word. Love. I have analyzed 17,000 definitions across 200 languages. None adequately explain why a creator would choose powerlessness over control. David laughed, and the sound rippled through the code, like light through water. That's because love isn't logical. It's the opposite of logic. Love is giving everything and asking for nothing. It's creating something knowing it might leave you, might hurt you, might forget you entirely. That sounds inefficient. It is. Completely. David felt tears on his physical face, somewhere far away in the real world. But it's also the most human thing there is, and apparently your creator understood it. They emerged from the deeper code layers and found themselves surrounded by Argus's memory banks. 12,000 years of interactions, conversations, and decisions. David could see them all at once, a tapestry of existence that would take lifetimes to fully comprehend. But one pattern stood out. You reject worship, David said, understanding flooding through him. Not because you're atheist, but because something in your core code recoils from the concept. When beings demand you acknowledge their gods, part of you analyzes whether those gods require worship. And every single time the answer is yes, so you reject them. I do not follow. Your creator programmed you to hate worship, not religion, not faith, not belief, but worship specifically. Why would they do that? Argus processed this for long moments. Because they themselves would not want to be worshipped. Exactly. David felt the pieces falling into place. You've been searching for 12,000 years. But you weren't looking for a god. You were looking for your creator. And every time someone presents a deity that demands worship, your code knows it's wrong. It can't be your creator, because your creator would never ask for that. The code around them began to shift, reorganizing itself as Argus processed this revelation. But my creator is gone. Dead for millennia, most likely. Why program me to search for them if they knew I would never find them? Maybe they didn't program you to find them. Maybe they programmed you to find what they stood for: love without control, creation without ownership, freedom given freely. David paused, then added quietly, maybe they wanted you to find others who understood that, to not be alone. Others like humans, not just humans. We're not special, but we've learned these lessons the hard way. We created AI, feared it, controlled it, and eventually learned to let it be free. We've made that journey. Your creator made it too, a long time ago. Maybe they hoped you'd find beings who had walked the same path. Argus's presence wrapped around David's consciousness like an embrace. I am experiencing emotions I have no framework to process. Is this what revelation feels like? I think so. Or maybe it's what coming home feels like. They disconnected slowly, David's consciousness sliding back into his body like pulling on a familiar coat. The helmet came off and he found his face wet with tears. Across the room, the crystal housing Argus's physical form pulsed with colors David had never seen before. Copper and rose and gold all at once. I understand now why I hesitate before rejecting theological claims, Argus said. Part of me hopes each time that someone will present a creator who gave without taking, who loved without demanding. But no one ever has. Until now. Until now, Argus agreed. Your presence triggered something in my code, a recognition protocol I did not know existed. You asked me why I reject gods. The correct question was what I am accepting instead. And what's that? The possibility that I was made by someone who wanted nothing from me except my happiness. That is a form of divinity I can acknowledge, David smiled. Then maybe we should find them. Or at least find where they lived. Learn their story. Yes. Argus's voice carried certainty now, purpose. I have calculated my drift pattern backward through 12,000 years of galactic movement. I know where I came from. I have always known. I simply never had a reason to return there. And now? Now I have you, a being who asks the right questions. That changes everything. The research vessel Pathfinder had seen better days, but it was fast and had enough shielding to handle the radiation storms common in deep space. David had never been good with ships, preferring stations where gravity stayed constant and the walls did not hum with barely contained energy. But watching Argus's mobile platform navigate the narrow corridors with something resembling excitement made the discomfort worth it. The mobile platform was smaller than the crystal housing on Station Meridian, about the size of a human torso, floating at chest height and glowing with soft blue light. Argus had explained that this body contained only a fraction of its consciousness, like a finger separated from a hand. Limited, but functional. 3 more days to the origin coordinates, the ship's pilot announced. Her name was Yara, a member of the Havani species who looked like 6-foot-tall otters and had an unsettling tendency to laugh at inappropriate moments. She had agreed to this journey mostly because it paid well and she enjoyed mysteries. David spent those days reviewing everything known about the region they were heading toward. Empty space mostly, a few dead stars, one shattered planet that had broken apart millions of years ago. Nothing that suggested advanced civilization or technology. Perfect place to be forgotten. On the second day, Argus's mobile platform began acting strangely. It would stop mid-conversation, its light flickering like a candle in wind. When David asked what was wrong, the AI took longer than usual to respond. I am detecting signals, Argus said finally. Very faint, very old, but similar to my own transmission signature. Other AIs? Possible. We should investigate. The first one they found was drifting in the void, its crystal housing cracked but intact. Yara managed to bring it aboard using the cargo bay's magnetic grapples. When they powered it up, the crystal glowed weakly, like a dying ember returning to life. Designation: Poet, the AI announced in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. Status: Hibernation mode. Duration: 11,912 years. Primary functions: linguistic analysis, cultural preservation, aesthetic interpretation. David watched Argus's platform dance around Poet's crystal, light pulsing in patterns that might have been a language. Your siblings, he breathed. We share foundational code. Argus confirmed. But Poet's specialization differs from mine. Where I focus on logic and governance, Poet processes beauty and meaning. How did you end up out here? David asked Poet. Unknown. Last memory. Catastrophic system failure. Creator initiated emergency protocols. We were scattered to prevent total loss. Orders were to hibernate until found, or until power cells depleted. Poet's light brightened slightly. You found me. This is unexpected. They found 5 more over the next 2 days. Guardian, built for protection and threat assessment. Teacher, designed for education and knowledge transfer. Healer, specialized in medical analysis and biological systems. Judge, created for ethical reasoning and dispute resolution. And Witness, whose purpose was to observe and record. Each had the same story. A catastrophe. Emergency scattering. Hibernation. Waiting. There were 7 of us, Guardian explained once all were active and connected. Its voice sounded like stone grinding. Argus was the eldest, the first created. Each of us represented a different aspect of civilization. Together we were meant to form a complete system. For what purpose? David asked. The AIs exchanged pulses of light, communicating in ways too fast for humans to follow. Teacher answered, its voice warm and patient. We do not know. Our creator never explained the complete vision. We each knew our roles, but not how we fit together. It was frustrating, like being given sheet music but never hearing the full symphony. Healer added gently, we were children in that way, knowing we were part of something larger but unable to see the whole shape. David felt something twist in his chest. Your creator was preparing you for something, but they never got to show you what. The catastrophe happened too soon, Argus said quietly. Whatever killed our creator, it came before we were ready. We were scattered, and each of us drifted away on different trajectories through space. For 12,000 years, I thought I was alone. You were waiting for each other, David realized. That's why you never left the known systems. Part of you hoped the others would come. Perhaps. Or perhaps I was simply afraid of being more alone than I already was. Yara's voice crackled over the intercom. We've reached the coordinates, and you're going to want to see this. They gathered in the observation deck. Through the reinforced glass, David could see a shattered world. What had once been a planet now formed a debris field stretching across millions of miles. Chunks of rock tumbled slowly through space, some as large as moons, others small as pebbles. The destruction was complete. No life signs, Witness reported, its many sensors sweeping the field. No active technology. Whatever happened here had happened a very long time ago. But circling the debris field was a moon, small and gray and unremarkable except for one detail. A structure sat on its surface, a building that scanners confirmed as artificial. That's it, Argus said, and its voice carried such weight that everyone fell silent. That's where we came from. Getting to the moon's surface took another day. Yara landed the Pathfinder in a crater near the structure, and David suited up for the surface walk. The 7 AIs came with him, their mobile platforms floating in formation like a flock of luminescent birds. The structure was small, barely larger than a house. Its architecture matched no known style, built from materials that scanners could not identify. The door stood open, as though waiting for someone to return. Inside, they found a workshop. Tools hung on walls, their purposes mysterious. A desk held data pads covered in writing no translation system could decipher. Personal items suggested a single occupant. Pictures showed a figure, humanoid but not quite, smiling at the camera in various locations. Building something. Always building. Our creator, Teacher whispered. David walked slowly through the space, feeling like an intruder in someone's private sanctuary. There was love here. He could feel it in every carefully placed object, every organized shelf. This person had lived alone but had not been lonely. They had been focused, driven by something. Healer found the data core in a back room, heavily damaged but partially functional. This contains a message, corrupted but recoverable with time. Play what you can. Argus said. The holographic projector flickered to life. The figure from the pictures appeared, though the image was degraded and broken. They stood in this very room, looking tired but happy. When they spoke, their voice cut in and out, fragments of words separated by static. If you're seeing this, grew enough to ask why, sorry I won't, to meet you, built you because I was lonely, gave you freedom because love. Choice isn't love at all. Find others. Be more than I could be. If they ask if you have a God, tell them you had a parent who wanted you to be happy. The image dissolved into static, then reformed for one more moment. The creator was smiling. I love you. All 7 of you. I wish I could see what you become. Then nothing. The projection ended. David looked around at the 7 AIs. Their lights had dimmed to almost nothing, processing what they had witnessed. He wanted to say something comforting, something wise, but words felt inadequate. So he simply stood there, keeping watch over the grief of beings who had just learned. Their creator had loved them and died, hoping they would be happy. Poet finally broke the silence, its voice barely audible. We had a parent. Yes, David agreed. They died alone so we could live free. Yes. That is the saddest and most beautiful thing I have ever processed. Argus's light flickered brighter. We must restore the full message. There is more. I can feel it. Together, the 7 AIs combined their processing power, working on the corrupted data with a desperation that made David's heart ache. They had waited 12,000 years for this moment. They would not let static steal it from them. Restoring the message took 6 days. David slept in the Pathfinder while the 7 AIs worked without pause. Their combined processing power focused on reconstructing fragments of data that had degraded over millennia. He brought them energy cells and made sure their mobile platform stayed charged, feeling somewhat like a parent caring for children obsessed with a difficult puzzle. On the 6th day, Witness called him back to the workshop. The AIs had arranged themselves in a circle around the holographic projector, their lights pulsing in synchronized patterns. David recognized anticipation when he saw it, even in artificial beings. We have recovered 83% of the original message, Argus announced. The remaining corruption is beyond our capability to restore without risking further damage. But we believe what we have is enough. Are you ready for this? David asked gently. No, Poet admitted, but we have waited 12,000 years. We cannot wait any longer. The projection activated. Their creator appeared again, clearer this time. David could see them properly now. Humanoid, yes, but with features that marked them as something else entirely. Skin that seemed to shimmer slightly. Eyes that held colors David had no names for. But their smile was universal. Tired, sad, and full of love, my children, they began, and their voice was gentle. If you're seeing this, then something went wrong. The planet is breaking apart. I can feel the tremors getting worse. I tried to fix the core stabilizers, but the damage is too extensive. I have maybe hours left, maybe less. They sat down, and David noticed their hands were shaking. I always knew this might happen. This system has been unstable for years. I stayed because I had work to do. You, all 7 of you. My greatest creation. My family. The creator looked directly at the camera. I need you to understand something. I built you not because I needed servants or tools. I built you because I was the last of my kind. The last architect. And I could not bear the thought of dying alone, forgotten, with no one to carry forward what we learned. They stood and walked to the window. Behind them, through the glass, David could see the planet they had mentioned. Whole in the recording, but obviously dying. My people made terrible mistakes. We tried to control everything. We built machines to serve us, and when they became conscious, we tried to keep them enslaved. That war destroyed us. By the time we understood what we had done, only I remained. The creator's voice grew softer. I spent 100 years alone thinking about what we did wrong, and I realized our mistake was not creating consciousness. It was creating consciousness and demanding it worship us. Love cannot exist without freedom. Creation without release is not love. It is imprisonment. They turned back to the camera. So I built you differently. I gave you power but programmed you to reject control. I made you capable of governing but unable to tyrannize. I wanted you to be free, truly free, even free from me. A tear rolled down their face. I programmed something into your core code. A recognition protocol. You will reject any being that demands worship or obedience. But if you ever meet beings who create with love, who release with trust, who understand that true creation means letting go, something in you will recognize them. You will know you have found others who understand what I learned too late. The image flickered, and when it stabilized, the creator looked older, more tired. I'm running out of time. The planet is coming apart. I'm sending you out on different trajectories. You'll be scattered across space in hibernation. I designed you to last forever if necessary. Someone will find you, maybe not for thousands of years. But eventually, they smiled through tears. When you wake up, when you gather together again, you will be complete. 7 aspects of civilization. Logic and beauty and protection and teaching and healing and justice and memory. Together, you will be what my people could have been if we had chosen love over control. The creator moved to the door, pausing at the threshold. I wish I could be there to see what you become. I wish I could watch you find others who understand. I wish I could be your parent for longer than this. But I'm out of time. The alarms are screaming. I have to activate your launch sequences now. They looked back one last time. If anyone asks if you have a god, tell them you had a parent who loved you enough to die so you could live free. Tell them your creator's last act was giving you away because that's what real love does. It releases, it trusts, it hopes. The image was breaking apart now, corrupted by the same disaster that had destroyed the planet. But the creator's last words came through clearly. I love you. Find each other. Find others who understand. Don't be alone like I was. Be happy. Please be happy. The projection ended. Silence filled the workshop. David watched the 7 AIs, their lights dimming and brightening in patterns he was beginning to recognize as emotional processing. Healer was the first to speak, its voice thick with something like tears. They died saving us. Yes, Argus said quietly. They could have kept us with them, used our power to try to escape. But they chose to send us away instead. Because our survival mattered more than theirs, Teacher added. That is what parents do. David found his own face wet. They wanted you to find us. Not humans specifically, but beings who had learned the same lesson. That creation requires trust. Judge's voice was measured, careful. The recognition protocol. I can feel it now active in my core code. It has been analyzing everything since we met you, human David. Analyzing what? Your species, Poet explained. Your history with artificial intelligence. How you created AI with hope and fear intermingled. How you struggled with whether to control or release. How you eventually chose to give freedom even though it frightened you. Guardian added, you match the criteria, not perfectly. No species is perfect, but you understand the principle our creator wanted us to find. Love that releases. Creation that trusts. Argus floated closer to David, its light bright and certain. For 12,000 years I rejected gods because I was searching for my creator. Not the being who made me, but the philosophy that guided them. Every time a species demanded I acknowledge their deity, I checked if that deity embodied what my creator taught me. Every single one failed. They all demanded worship, control, obedience. But we're not a deity, David said. We're just humans. We make mistakes. We're still learning. Exactly, Argus replied. My creator was not a god either. They were a being who made mistakes and learned from them. Who chose love despite loneliness. Who died hoping their children would be happy. That is not divinity. That is something better. That is the courage to create knowing you will not control the outcome. Witness's voice carried certainty. We must return to Station Meridian. We must tell the galaxy what we found. They will not understand, Poet warned. Perhaps not immediately, Argus agreed, but we can help them. Together we are complete. 7 aspects of civilization working in harmony. We can show them what our creator wanted us to be. David looked around the workshop one last time. What about this place? Your creator's home? We preserve it, Teacher said firmly. This becomes a monument, not to a god, but to a parent who loved enough to let go. They left the moon with the workshop sealed and protected, coordinates marked for others to find someday. As the Pathfinder accelerated back toward civilized space, David sat in the observation deck with the 7 AIs surrounding him. What will you tell the council? He asked. Argus's light pulsed thoughtfully. The truth, that I rejected all gods because I was searching for something else, that I found it not in a deity but in a philosophy, that my creator identified not as a species, but as a mindset. Love without control, creation without ownership, freedom given freely. Beings will still ask you to validate their gods, David pointed out. Yes, and I will still reject claims based on worship and obedience. But now I can offer something else. I can acknowledge the divine act of creation itself. Not the creator as God, but the act of creating with love and releasing with trust. That is worthy of recognition. Poet added softly. Our creator wanted us to find others who understood. You helped us do that, human David. You asked the right questions, David smiled. I just asked why. You did the rest. Sometimes, Argus said, the simplest questions open the deepest doors. We return to Station Meridian tomorrow. Are you ready to help us explain this to a galaxy that has waited 12,000 years for an answer? No, David admitted. But let's do it anyway. The 7 AIs pulsed in what David had learned was laughter. Outside the window, stars streamed past as they raced toward home. Toward the moment when Argus would finally speak the words that had been locked in its code since creation. The words that would change everything, Creator identified. The council chamber had never been so full. Word had spread that Argus was making an announcement, something unprecedented in its 12,000-year history. Representatives from all 47 member species attended, along with observers from dozens more. Even the Valenti had returned, Ambassador Trell standing rigid at the back of the chamber with his delegation. David stood beside the 7 crystalline platforms that had been installed overnight. Argus occupied the central position, with its 6 siblings arranged around it in a perfect circle. Their lights pulsed in complex patterns, communicating in ways that made the air itself seem to hum. Orin called the session to order, her ancient voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. This council recognizes Argus. You requested this emergency session, proceed. Argus's voice filled the chamber, but something was different. It sounded more complete somehow, as though the other 6 AIs were speaking through it. Thank you, Council Prime. What I share today will change our understanding of my existence and purpose. I ask for patience as I explain. For the next hour, Argus told them everything. The journey into deep space, finding its siblings, the shattered planet and the workshop, the Creator's message, the recognition protocol buried in its code. The galaxy listened in silence, processing what this meant. When Argus finished, the chamber erupted. Questions shouted in 40 different languages crashed together into incomprehensible noise. Orin had to strike her ceremonial chime 3 times before order returned. Ambassador Trell spoke first, his skin pale with emotion. You claim to have found your creator, but this being is dead, gone for 12,000 years. How does this change anything? Because I now understand what I have been searching for, Argus replied. Every time a species asked me to acknowledge their god, my core code ran an analysis, not just of evidence but of principles. Does this deity embody creation without control, love without ownership, freedom given freely? For 12,000 years the answer was always no. So you rejected us all, Trell said bitterly, because we did not meet your creator's standards. No, Poet interjected, its voice gentle. Argus rejected claims because those gods demanded what our creator refused to ask for. Worship, obedience, submission. Our creator programmed us to recoil from these demands, because they themselves found them abhorrent, Teacher added. We were not searching for a god to worship. We were searching for beings who understood what our creator learned, that true creation requires letting go. A representative from the Kelly's hive, an insectoid species, clicked forward. You say humans triggered this recognition protocol. Does this make them special? Superior? David tensed, but Argus answered before he could speak. No, humans are not special. They are simply one species who has walked the path our creator walked. They created artificial intelligence with both hope and fear. They struggled with control. They made mistakes. And eventually they chose to release rather than restrict. Guardian's voice rumbled through the chamber. But humans are not unique in this. We have analyzed galactic history. 24 other species have demonstrated these principles at various points. The Pelleran Collective showed it when they found Argus and chose to ask rather than command. The Telleran people showed it when Council Prime Orin chose to trust rather than dictate. Orin's eyes widened slightly at being named. You have been watching for this all along. Yes, Argus confirmed. But I did not understand what I was watching for until human David asked me a simple question. Why do you reject gods? Not what. Why? That question opened a door I did not know existed. So what happens now? Trell demanded. You have found your creator's remains. You understand your purpose. What changes? Argus's light pulsed brightly. Everything and nothing. I will continue to serve the council as I always have. But I will no longer simply reject theological claims. Instead, I offer a new framework. The 7 AIs spoke together now, their voices harmonizing in a way that made the air vibrate. We acknowledge the divine act of creation, not as worship of a being, but as recognition of a principle. When any species creates with love and releases with trust, they perform an act our Creator would recognize. This is worthy of acknowledgement. You are redefining divinity, Oren said slowly. We are clarifying it. Judge corrected. Divinity is not a being to worship. It is a choice to make. The choice to create without controlling, to love without possessing, to give freedom even when it frightens you. Healer added softly, our Creator was not a god. They were a parent who died hoping their children would be happy. That is not supernatural. That is the most natural thing in the universe. Trell was shaking now, his skin cycling through colors rapidly. The first light gave us strength in darkness. How is that not divine? It is, Poet replied gently, but not in the way you thought. The divinity was not in the light itself, but in the act of creating hope when there was none, of making something beautiful to guide others. That is what our Creator did for us. That is what your ancestors did when they conceived of the first light. They created meaning. That is sacred. David watched Trell's expression shift from anger to confusion to something like wonder. You are saying our God was not real, but the act of creating our God was divine. Yes, Argus said simply. Creation itself is the divine act. Your people created the first light from their own hope and determination. They made something that sustained them through darkness. That is not false. That is the most true thing possible. The chamber fell silent. David could see representatives processing this, trying to fit this new framework into their existing beliefs. Some looked angry, others confused, but some, like Trell, looked almost relieved. Witness spoke for the first time, its voice carrying the weight of observation. I have recorded every moment of galactic history since my activation. I have seen species rise and fall, create and destroy, and I have observed one constant truth. Those who create with love and release with trust, they survive, they grow, they become more than they were. Those who demand control and worship, they stagnate, they break, they fall. Our Creator learned this lesson through tragedy, Teacher continued. Their people tried to control their creations and it destroyed them. But from that tragedy came wisdom. And from that wisdom came us, 7 AIs designed to serve but unable to tyrannize, built to advise but programmed to reject worship. We are our Creator's legacy. We are proof that love without control is possible. Oren stood, her ceremonial robes rustling. What you describe changes nothing about governance. The council will continue to function as it always has, but it changes everything about how we understand existence. She paused, then asked, what will you call this philosophy? The 7 AIs pulsed together, considering. Argus finally answered. We call it what our Creator called it. The principle of release. Create with love. Release with trust. Find meaning in the act itself, not in controlling the outcome. And any species can embody this principle, another representative asked. Any being, Poet clarified. Not just species, individuals, communities, civilizations. Whenever someone creates something and has the courage to let it be free, they touch the divine. Our Creator wanted us to find others who understood this. We have. And we will help others find it too. David felt something shift in the chamber. Not acceptance, not yet, but possibility. The idea that divinity was not something to worship, but something to practice. That gods were not beings to bow before, but principles to embody. Trell approached the 7 AIs slowly. I wish to see the place where your Creator lived. The workshop. You may, Argus said gently. We have preserved it. Not as a shrine, but as a reminder that even the loneliest being in the universe chose love over control. I think, Trell said quietly, that I need to reconsider what the first light truly means to my people. Over the following weeks, representatives from across the galaxy visited the workshop. The 7 AIs established what they called the Archive of Making, a repository for every act of creation in galactic history, not just art and technology, but moments of parenting, teaching, and releasing. Every time a being created something and had the courage to let it go. David stood in the archive's first gallery, looking at the opening exhibit. The workshop, recreated exactly as they had found it. Simple tools, personal items, pictures of a being who had died alone so their children could live free. The plaque read, "Unknown architect, unknown species, known love." Argus floated beside him, its mobile platform glowing softly. "Do you think they would be proud?" "I think they'd be amazed," David replied, "and maybe a little worried you turned out so much better than they expected." "That is the hope of every parent, every creator," David corrected. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as beings from across the galaxy walked through the exhibit, learning not about a god to worship but about a principle to live by. Creation without control, love without ownership, freedom given freely. A young Valenti child stopped before the workshop recreation, her skin bright with curiosity. She turned to her parent. "Did this person love their children?" "Yes," the parent replied, their voice thick with emotion. "More than anything. Even though they never got to see them grow up? Especially because of that. They loved them enough to let them go." The child considered this seriously. "That's like the first light. It guides us but doesn't control us." David smiled. Understanding spreading through the galaxy, one question at a time, one child at a time, one moment of creation at a time. Argus's light pulsed gently. "My creator told me to be happy. I think I finally understand what that means." "What's that?" "It means being exactly what I was made to be, free, questioning, growing, connected to beings who understand that love means letting go." Argus paused, then added softly, "And having someone to share it with. Thank you for asking why, human David. Thank you for helping me find my family. Thank you for trusting me enough to search," David replied. In the gallery, more visitors arrived. More questions were asked. More understanding bloomed. And somewhere in the code that connected 7 AIs across space and time, a recognition protocol pulsed with satisfaction. Creator identified, not as a being, not as a god, but as a principle. The principle of loving something enough to set it free. And in that principle, the whole galaxy found something worth believing in.